Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. It feels like a little while since I moderated one of these things. I've been on the road quite a bit, but had to come on for this one. Very excited for this one in particular. And what we're going to be talking about today is the Aaron Ross's playbook to reignite growth. And before I kind of introduce Aaron Ross, who in my books doesn't need an introduction, just super quick housekeeping. So number one, all Sales Hacker webinars are recorded. So if you need to jump off, if you need to close a deal, I know we're getting to the end of the year, so it's a super hectic time for all the sellers out there, sales leaders. It's okay. We'll record this and we'll have this in your inbox within about 24 hours or so. And then number two, so we got some really meaty content lined up for you. We got a nice big deck, some visuals, but every time we do these for the community. So we do these and we want input from you, and we kind of want the community to drive. So please go down to the Q&A box, chat, let us know your name, your company, your title, who you're with. And if you have any relevant questions to what Aaron or myself is kind of talking about throughout, please hop in. I'll try and act as an advocate for the community as we go through. And yeah, without further ado, I want to introduce my awesome guest, Aaron Ross. Aaron, welcome to the community.
Yeah, Scott. Hey, happy to be here. And by the way, I guarantee need an introduction. There's lots of people, 99.99%. Oh yeah.
Within the sales community, I would say we have a lot of mid-market tech, B2B salespeople. I think most would know.
Maybe.
Probably. Maybe you're too humble. I don't know. One of the two.
Anyway.
All right. So Aaron Ross, I will do a quick introduction. So Aaron Ross is a keynote speaker. He's an author, a dad of 9, which is a super interesting fact, which we may get a few little knocks on the door behind
maybe
him.
some screams.
Maybe some screams. We'll see, and it'll prove the point. But Aaron Ross is the co-CEO of a company called Predictable Revenue, which was, I believe, spun out of the book Predictable Revenue.
Yeah, correct.
Which I read literally when I first got started in tech, and I think it has really become, Silicon Valley's sales Bible. I know most sales leaders have it on their desk, and now he has a new one. So Aaron's got a new one that has come out called From Impossible to Inevitable, which you wrote with Jason Lemkin, CEO of SaaStr, also a big name. But it's an exciting time for you. You got the new book, and you got a big move on the horizon as well.
Yeah, we're in a couple of weeks moving most of the family to Edinburgh, Scotland. So wow. 5 of the 9, the youngest 5 of the 9 kids. The kids span from 3 years old to 21. But yeah, it's a big move. That's why my eyes seem a little like bloodshot and panicked, because it's just this ridiculous project. It never ends.
Yeah.
So like many things feel like parenting. It's ridiculous project that never ends.
Never ends. Can't get out of it. Okay.
So all right. Well, why don't we can jump into things.
Yeah, let's dive in quick.
I don't like a look. If people have here questions, comments, put in chat. Scott will help. Pull things out.
Yeah.
And so part of what this is, and I'll share my screen here. Looking at what some of the newest ideas that were in the this Impossible to Inevitable book, which was again with Jason Lemkin. It came out originally 3.5 or so years ago. There's a new edition, this big red bar. So the kind of newest stuff is what we're going to at least touch on today. And I will just do the screen share. But what's interesting is I never expected to be a sales author or growth author, or it's kind of weird. I was an engineer from, I guess, Attitude in high school and college. I had like software programming and civil engineering. And in having a company that failed and realizing, wow, I need to know sales, going to salesforce.com to learn sales, creating an outbound system there. Right. That's, again, if you've read Predictable Revenue, heard about it, that was really that book. What's different is then after that, just looking at what are, again, some of the predictable ways that companies grow or don't grow. That's really the essence of the Impossible book, and we'll talk about today, or the, what are those, like a growth Bible? Like, what are these things that you can't do 1,000 things? You can do 3 or 1. What are those more important things to focus on to either create growth or reignite growth? And I will say it's interesting because having a big family, I have to live a lot of these principles, because getting married, I got married 8 years ago. 8 years ago, yeah. That's 0 to 9 kids. Really, it was in 6 years. That's a hyperscaling a family is a different book, right? There's some adopted, there's some from prior marriage, some bio kids together, some adopted. It's a whole mix. But I personally had to grow my own income and my business. And it's interesting, like what I did to make money for myself was so similar in a lot of ways, but different than as companies. So I have done this for myself. We have a company, predictablerevenue.com, so 5 going on 7, 8 million. I've consulted with companies. So from all these lenses, like what are these kind of really isolated reasons why people struggle and what to do about it? I say I like to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Do a lot of doing, not just teaching. So there's 4 reasons why revenue does plateau, right? So the first one is really more, you're trying to skip a step. It's really more impatience, I think. So we'll move on from that. If you're familiar with predictable revenue, sales specialization, you prospectors who prospect, closers who close, but people don't go far enough. The third one is being dependent on word of mouth, like customer referrals, relationships. And the last is unpredictable lead generation, kind of related. So there will be some refreshing of whatever you've heard. If you've read books, there's a lot of refreshing, updating and seeing ideas. But this one, skipping a step, really came from David Scott, who's a VC at Matrix Partners. And he said, big picture, first step, you find product market fit. There's people who want to buy your things, get some customers. And then the second is that repeatable, predictable lead generation and sales model. And then the third is scaling. And the problem is people try to skip the second step. Like, we got customers, great, let's grow. Or you kind of focus on that second step, which is what's the repeatability of the revenue model, but you don't realize how much longer it can take than you think it should. You're like, we've been doing this for 3 months. We've been doing this for 6 months. And I mean, it could take, actually I should ask David, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of companies, if it took 2 years for that kind of step. And it's not, one and then the other and then the third. There's some blending, but I think the point is people don't put enough attention and focus on refining the revenue lead generation sales model to be predictable before trying to put the pedal to the metal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what he says. Yeah.
And quickly, just a point on that. Do you think people change courses too fast then before they know if it's working? I know that's a common thing. You test something and then you're like, oh, it's broken in 3 months, and then you move on.
The challenging answer is yes, sometimes they do. Like, again, outbound prospecting, a lot of companies put 3 months of work in, and if it doesn't work, they're like, okay, we quit. Or maybe even 6 months. It should really be like 1.5 years. But on the flip side, I see what happens a lot is people are, and honestly, we've made this mistake at our company. Hey, let's do a program like online ads or events or whatever it is. And, we're getting leads. We're getting some sort of, I want to use the word vanity, but there's some sort of indicator. And it tends up being an illusion later. So you feel like you're getting lots of leads, but then nothing closes later. So there's a lot of reasons why there's challenges to kind of nail that predictable lead generation and sales model. But I think the point is there's really 2 things. First is that really focus on improving the process, not on the end result. I feel like there's like a Buddhist saying, be like the right mindset and the right actions will lead to the right result. I'm paraphrasing. Versus obsessing about how many sales did we get. Well, obsess about what your conversion rate, have you broken down the process, and like that's where you should obsess until things are working is 1 step. And the 2 is just be prepared for it to take a lot longer than you think it should. You can't control that part. You can't. So impatience. All right, well, let's move on. Okay, so there's a company called Regal Sagemount, which is a $3 billion private equity company we do a lot with. And so they have this playbook. This is actually one of the new sections in the new Impossible book. And what's interesting is SageMount has, they've said, hey, all these companies we've sold, invested, and so on. What we see is the biggest creation of value for a company is increasing the organic sales rate, growth rate. Yeah, we could kind of buy companies and merge them together. There might be IT packaging of the things, but if we just basically grow sales faster, a faster growth rate, that is by far, the biggest increase in value. So again, I hope we're preaching to the choir. I think it's just interesting to see how enormous, like 70% of the value of these companies being created is just from a faster growth rate in sales. So again, when you're at a company, I think if you are a sales director or sales leader, you should realize, there's reasons why it's so important, because it's not even just the revenue growth rate. This is for when they're saying, if they're growing companies from $100 million in valuation to 300 million, most of that is just from having a faster growth rate. Yeah. So the point is,
sorry to interrupt you yet. Do you think you could break that down further into sales and marketing, or in your eyes, is the growth engine one and the same?
One and the same, the revenue engine. Yeah. And that's it. We actually use that term a lot more now, even in the Impossible book, is like the revenue team, the revenue engine, because it's like the pitcher and the catcher. You need both to have a game,
Yeah, agreed.
So the point is, though, when SageMount, again, this is a multi-billion-dollar private equity company, invests in a company, the first thing they do, and their number one priority, is how do we get sales growing faster? Okay, and things are related, like team and finance and debt, and but how do we get sales growing faster? So here's an example. They put $40 million into a company that had 150 people. They were getting some leads from referrals and inbound, and they had salespeople doing everything, right? Half a dozen of them doing their own, they wouldn't be doing prospecting. They were like getting some leads from here or there and closing, and they wanted to triple how fast this company was growing. And so there's like 10 things they did, but the main three we'll get into. But they're like, the number one priority is, how do we affect these metrics, right? How many, we get more meetings, more proposals, and more closed. Now, the exact metrics are going to vary company to company, but the point is they have a few really high level metrics that they're focused on. I mean, today we're in this world of, you can have metric overwhelm so easily, right? So we've got to grow sales. What are the really high level metrics we need? Here's the playbook we're going to start with. So one is specialized sales further than ever. Second is nail and niche, or sorry, in Europe it's niche, but here I guess niche. It's really kind of nailing who your real target is, the customer and their messaging. And the third is ramping lead gen, right? Usually through outbound prospecting in this case, because they just want to come in, it's very predictable, come in and grow it. Now, there's all kinds of other optimizations, but these are like the big three they do. When they're trying to maximize the value of a company by maximizing the growth rate, that's it. So I hope this slide is familiar to most people here, right? Sales specialization. What we don't want to do is have salespeople doing everything as generalists, where salespeople are doing their own prospecting and closing, maybe responding to leads, maybe managing customers, right? That just does not work unless you're selling to like literally consumer or consumer type customers. So if that's new, again, the thing is, salespeople, if they try to do more than one job, they just don't do them very well. So if you have a team of 10 salespeople and they're all supposed to do all their own or the bulk of their own prospecting and closing and manage customers, it's just no. It's so far more effective to have prospectors who prospect, closers who close, account management team that's separate, and so on. And the metaphor is, I don't know any sports team where the coach tells the team, all right, team, everybody go out and attack, and everybody go out and defend, and everybody play goalie, and everybody play midfield, right? It's insane. But that's just the culture of historical sales. So this is it. Now, where do people, a lot of people here are like, yeah, I know that. Okay, so where do people miss out or go wrong? So really, really common mistake, having SDR. So the junior role is often called sales development rep, business development rep, but call them SDRs. They're doing kind of either prospecting and or responding to marketing leads to the website, right? And then passing them to a closer, new business sales. Outbound will not work well if they are juggling inbound leads and doing outbound prospecting. Now, the caveat to that is, if I'm a prospector and I'm doing, you know, if 5 or 10% of my day is some other thing, sure. But once it gets past 10% and there's inbound leads, there's a lot of reasons why inbound and outbound are oil and water. They're actually very different jobs. But because the metrics, the kind of the seniority level and the metrics look the same, right? There's emails and there's calls and appointments and opportunities, but the jobs are completely different. The rhythm and the mentality are completely different. The funnel results are completely different. So it's, on the surface, they look similar, but they're not, right? It's inbound is fast response, very reactive to inbound leads, people who are already pre-educated to some extent. Outbound is much more methodical. I would say slower, but again, methodical, proactive, engaging people who've never heard of you. So there's so many, they're different jobs, right? When you blend them, no. I'm just telling you that right now because people do that and it's, you are making a big mistake. Yeah, the exception is, the one exception here is if you have a business where you're literally selling to solopreneurs, and it's like one person, one call closed, 2 calls. Okay, that kind of, the rules go out the window here. But for everyone else, gotta go specialization, have more jobs, not fewer, split inbound and outbound, and just like make sure you're splitting the closers from account management. Generally, I don't know if I've ever seen a company with too many roles. I see companies all the time with not enough roles. So that's the lesson here is whatever you have, look at how do you create more jobs in sales, more specialization, because more specialization equals more focus. And when people are more focused, especially these days with this overwhelm, they can do fewer things better.
Is there a deal size in your eyes where it doesn't make sense to have an outbound business development function?
Yeah, well, for outbound itself, we tend to say you want at least some segment of your customers to be worth $10,000 lifetime value or up.
Okay.
You know, that doesn't mean all your customers average. It's like you might have one segment, like a small business where it doesn't make sense and a mid-market where it does make sense. Specialization makes sense. That's just for outbound. But again, specialization makes sense at almost any level. It's kind of like how you do it. But I think again, if it's a really super simple sale, you can combine things like I'm getting inbound leads and closing them because it's like one call, a couple calls.
Yeah.
If it's but yeah, other than that, you want to make sure everything is separate. And just one more kind of fact is that it generally takes, if you're going to create a new role, probably takes like 6 months to kind of define it, staff it, and get the kinks worked out. So start early. But cool. The lesson is more sales roles. I would even encourage you to look at, hey, are there some intern jobs, like pre-SDR jobs that you can kind of incubate people in, whether it's in sales or operations, other places in the company? Because one of the great benefits of specialization is having that farm team that you can just kind of bring great people in and grow them up through the ranks and develop great salespeople. All right, let's talk about nailing a niche, because big lesson, predictable revenue came out a few years ago by consulting with companies on building or fixing outbound prospecting teams. And I saw, and sometimes just invite, like friends or people ask stuff, but when Jason and I did this new book, the number one most common problem that we saw was companies who hadn't nailed a niche and why they struggled. So I would say it's a bit different than product market fit. Product market fit is, okay, we feel like there's people who want our product. Nailing a niche really is this implication around what does it take to be able to market and sell to people who don't know you already, right? There's no prior trust or relationship. It's basically our version of crossing the chasm.
Yeah.
How do you go from selling to early adopters, people through word of mouth, to kind of mainstream buyers, right? Which is the big part of the market. But Twilio, we loved their example, did a much more detailed case study, how they nailed kind of just on fire, right? How they nail it. Because again, if you have a platform, one of the interesting challenges is when you have a platform business, sometimes that could be services where you can kind of do anything. It's like or it could be like a technology platform with DevOps, but Twilio has a communications API platform. So people who want to build like technology, software, or a phone app can put in things like text messaging and phone calls by using Twilio's platform versus building that stuff themselves. So Twilio enables people to have like video calls, texts, phone calls, and so on. And again, the challenge is platform. I can do anything with it. So it makes it actually hard to market it because people say, well, what do I do? So they did great. I really like some of the things they've done to make it easier for people to kind of to market and sell it. But the thing is, if you have a company and you're probably, most of the people are under 10 million in revenue, it's where you tend to plateau. It could be 500,000 to 10 million when you plateau with inbound leads and organic leads. And when you have this need of like, okay, how do we expand the market of people that we can connect with and they get it and they want to buy it? At least we want to find out about it, because we want to get away from this word of mouth or brand dependency. Like, it's great, we got to a few million based on our relationships, fantastic, but how do we get past that? And an indicator that you haven't nailed that is like, you'll spend money on online ads or conferences. Kind of most of the paid marketing or paid sales won't work, right? And that's how, when you can nail a niche or nail a niche, that's when you're like, okay, now we have a way to make paid marketing and leads and sales work to get past that plateau of our own network. So let's just touch on like what keeps people behind. So a lot of times companies get started, get their first few 100,000, few million, and because either the product is great or because it's lots of friends and family or customer referrals, they can get away with descriptions like this. This is from a services company. All right, we're a lean, agile team of consultants, analysts, and developers serving a market sector usually overlooked and overserved by larger consulting firms. Anyway, this message tells you really nothing. And they can get away with it because, again, if they're getting referrals to their business, they don't have to have a really sharp message. And it's the same for software companies, right? And you just end up confusing people, including
when
your
you
own
see
people.
all the buzzwords and the jargon and then all that.
I'm sure we could pull up an AI company. I mean, most websites, product companies, are quite confusing to people who don't work at the company or who aren't familiar already with the company. So we're in this world of overwhelm, and that's going to get worse. The painkiller to overwhelm is focus. So when you have vague messaging, you're trying to target too many companies, or you don't really know exactly what they care about, you end up not only confused, or you have maybe too many products and services. Red Hat has like 40, it's this huge portfolio of products and services. I don't have it handy. It's just overwhelming, not only to customers, but not to salespeople. So how do you create clarity between, because what you're really looking to do, if I can, let's see if I can make this work, little laser pointer, is, you start off, we have these people who know us, who trust us, and so they're willing to give us a lot of attention, right? We get a referral from a customer. Okay, Bob says you're great. I don't quite understand what you do, but he says you're great, so I'll sit down and talk to you for an hour. Okay, and as you need to grow, is when you plateau, you're like, okay, we need to be able to reach out to people who don't know us when there's no trust, right? Trying to earn 2 seconds of their time is hard. So you're kind of learning how to focus your message and targeting in a way that you can kind of connect with people who are only giving you this tiny sliver of attention. That's the goal here. I don't know how to turn my, oh, there we go, laser pointer off. I don't think it worked. Oh, well, I'll do this since, people, a referral will give you this much attention, but if you're doing some kind of cold outreach, it could be an outbound ad, outbound email or call, or they're only gonna give you this much attention. That's why your message, your targeting has to be focused, and your message has to be really sharp to fit in there for them to even look at it.
Makes sense.
Yep, let's go back to this. Okay, so that's the arc of attention. My laser pointer, I'm stuck in the, there we go. Nope, stuck in the laser pointer mode. No more laser, okay, there we go. All right,
there we go.
So we're talking about nailing a niche. It's not about being small, it's about being focused. Right? And this is challenging, especially because a lot of companies are started by smart people who can do lots of things. So the good news is you're great at lots of things. The bad news is you're great at lots of things, so it's hard to figure out who needs you the most. Because really here, probably the simplest place to start with the idea is look at your customers, the people who bought and have done well, the people who didn't buy, maybe the people who bought but it left. When were you a nice to have, and how did you know? And versus when were you a need to have, and what were those clues? Because you need to focus on the need to have, because the companies don't buy nice to have, they buy need to have. Now, again, you're not, as a company and product, you're not a nice to have company versus a need to have company. It's like, how do you discern the different situations? What are the clues you can look for, whether it's in database filters, whether it's in when your prospector or lead gen person is talking to them, whether it's like any kind of clues you can look for to disqualify the wrong people faster. So Twilio, some of the things I really liked about what they did was, and they're really good about getting their people out of the ivory tower and just really kind of feeling what it's like to be a customer. I think that this empathy through experience is really important and adds a lot to your people's ability to connect with customers. Salesforce had an advantage because salespeople use Salesforce, so it made it a lot easier to sell Salesforce. So when your people don't use whatever you do, it's just harder for them. They kind of think about it. They don't have that that hands-on knowledge and feeling and stories and details that make a big difference when writing copy or talking to prospects. Anyway, here's two things I really liked about what Twilio did in the early days. One is they have this value, one of their values is walk literally in your customer's shoes. And so there's a metaphor, hey, walk in the customer's shoes. What they do actually is they will offer customers a free new pair of shoes. Here, we'll give you these Twilio branded Chucks. In exchange, give us your dirty old shoes. And they hang those customer shoes up in their offices as reminders to think like the customer. Because we all need to be reminded of that constantly. Mm-hmm. The second one I think is even cooler is they make everyone who starts at Twilio build apps with the Twilio platform, whether they're lawyers or HR, everybody. So there's an onboarding system and engineers, but everyone who's been at the company has built an app with Twilio. So again, they're sort of finding ways to have their people walk the walk. So then later they can talk the talk. It's not just theory. They've actually touched it. Okay. Here's an example, in terms of having a better insight. What does this translate to? Well, we had a client called Kensington who was targeting hospitals and had a financial services product. And they would say, who's in charge of receivables? And not getting responses. Honestly, there's different types of receivables. It's complicated in the financial department in a hospital. So then they switched, did some interviews. Interviews are great. And they switched to kind of an internal jargon. Who handles patient cash? So it's automatically a lot more insightful in terms of people knowing, it doesn't sound like everything else coming in because they get all these financial services emails every day. I know patient cash is different than vendor cash. And so they got much better response when they were able to talk in the customer's language. Okay. Any good, I just thought, Scott, any good questions or chat comments we should touch on before we get to the ramp lead gen part?
Yeah, I think there's a good one here of that's around how can you simulate the experience that your buyers are having? Like and it sounds like outside of the normal scenarios. Let's say, for example, you're selling into doctors. Well, how do you get your sales team to start thinking like doctors? Can you simulate that role?
Yeah, I think if you were really creative, there probably would be ways to do that. But I think at a starting point, a lot of companies, even with salespeople, they don't get their salespeople to shadow people outside sales. Mm-hmm. Like go talk within your own company or customers. So go talk to other people in your company, if they're in product support, executives, wherever, and then go out and if doctors, go meet them. If you have a completely phone-based operation, so what? If like say doctors, there's gonna be one in your town. Like go meet them in person. Like it just adds more of that connection. So getting outside just the sales rut especially during that onboarding phase where you're just trying to get a better sense of the market and the company and the customers and the product, which then go back and refocusing on sales to do well. That's something I did at Salesforce, which I'm glad in the first month was I made the effort to go out and meet people at every function I could. And this is when there was 150 people and different kinds of customers, and whether it was kind of relevant or not, I just wanted to kind of look at everything. And I think companies, there's a lot of value in getting people a wide perspective in those early days, what it means to be at that company, who the customers are on the product, so that later when they go just into that little sales role, you know, in a few weeks, that they can be better prepared and well-rounded. So that's one way that anyone can do.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's so important. I know for me as well, as a young seller, I almost needed to understand the whole before I could play my role. That's a nice little rhyme.
Totally.
Had to understand the whole before I could play my role effectively. And I think doing that, especially in your first, couple months in a new role, is super important. And then the other thing that's just like super hyper tactical, which you touched on, is 9 times out of 10, not if you're selling it to doctors, but 9 times out of 10, you typically sell a product or a service into a persona that you have at your own organization. So go set up, monthly coffee meetings with if you sell into finance, with your personal CFO. And here we have the true to form, the dad of 9. We've got was it a puppy too? You got dogs?
Yeah,
on top of it?
she was just spayed yesterday. So, we got intruders. They realized, yeah, this is, like, there's no truly defensible place in the house, but.
Fair.
Darcy. Hi, Darcy.
What's up, Darcy?
Oh, I know. When I'm done. Okay. I'll mute the one. Yeah, there's not like there's the parents know, right? There's all kinds of like great moments, and then there's like the whining and crying, and you get everything. So
yeah, I love it. No, we're all good. I'm sure many of our attendees are parents themselves. So This is awesome. And it's Christmas time. It's time to be around family.
That's true. Now I will say, I think it was Nicole who mentioned site visits with SDRs. I hope that if you have this kind of idea that, the junior people shouldn't go on site visits, like, I think it's more important. The more junior people are, the more important it is to get them out of the office at some point. I mean, you need to get and to kind of expose them to different things, or get them to a conference, or get them to a customer visit, and just kind of see customers and talk to them in person and feel them and see how your senior people interact with them as well in different situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll pull, go back to sharing here. Let's do it. All right, so this last part is predictable lead generation, ramping lead generation, right? This is really what the goal of like stage mount companies are. And the nail a niche step is, if you're struggling with getting the lead generation results or like sales, like win rates, it's usually around a nail a niche issue. But when you're getting the predictable lead generation, so I think the mistake is there's still a lot of this myth of, hey, if I just create a great product, people will just come in and buy it. If I just get that viral blog post or video out, people will just buy it. Or if I have a lot of social media. Now, ultimately, like, predictable lead generation is what is your lever for growth. And you might have the great product, amazing sales process, great salespeople, but if your lead generation is erratic, you're going to struggle. So, all right, this is the classic seeds, nets, and spears, which really, again, is identifying, hey, there's these different kinds of leads. There's word of mouth leads, which have a different funnel and expectations and sales cycles and sales sizes. So then marketing leads, which are nets, and it's really about quantity over quality. And again, that funnel and those metrics are different than outbound prospecting, which would be the spears, or outbound business development. So they're different, which then the classic mistake is, if most of your leads had come from one source over the last year, whether it's marketing or word of mouth, and you need to add a new, I see this mistake all the time, which is when you're adding a new type of lead generation in, using, for example, the metrics within the marketing funnel as a kind of a baseline for metrics of what they should be in the sales funnel. Even worse is when you, like, actually the worst mistake is when you use metrics related to word of mouth leads, which have much, much better metrics than what you expect. and you apply those towards your kind of projections or expectations for marketing or outbound leads. Because word of mouth, fastest sales cycle, highest close rates, highest conversion rates, everything else. Okay, so let's talk about spears, right? Because that's really, so outbound, and again, there's so many cool things out there. AI, although I would love if someone is actually using AI in a way that's creating repeatable, meaningful results. I would love to hear from them, just because I'm sure it's out there. I haven't seen it yet. AI, email, everyone, what's the email template script, account-based, whatever, marketing, account-based sales, account-based. There's all this stuff. There's always a new app. There's trillions of apps, right? That really, ultimately, it's not even about all this. It's really only about the metrics and the dashboard. This is the dashboard. Actually, here's Darcy in the picture. This is our family car, which we can't take to Scotland. But again, it doesn't really matter how fast I'm going. If my speedometer or my maps are broken, like, where am I going? And with Outbound, all the tools, apps, emails, and templates are about, hey, what is actually creating results? So the problem with Outbound is that a lot of people miss some fundamental parts of the Outbound funnel because it's unique, relatively unique in the sense there's a lot of subjectivity. I mean, how do you define qualification? What's qualified? Was it an inbound lead? Was it an outbound lead? There's all these gray areas. But at a high level, here is an outbound funnel. This is from the predictable revenue book. It still applies. The percentages are lower these days because email is not working quite as well. But so the activity metrics are like, how much stuff am I doing? How many stuff? I think we should all know that. Results metrics. Are we getting conversations, meetings, conversion rates? And then here's where I highlighted in blue where we tend to not, like, the important one is number 3. Number 3 is how many qualified audited opportunities are we generating per month? And you might do that as a dollar rate, but let's just say number of qualified. So here's where people go wrong is that they leave the definition of qualified up to the prospectors and salespeople. Now, there might be some document that says, here's our sales agreement or SLA, or but that doesn't get checked. It never gets checked. So what happens is you have all this pipeline. And of course, there's always, it's like at the grocery store. When the grocery store makes a mistake, it's never in your favor. It's always in their favor. When there's a pipeline inaccurate, the pipeline is always overstated, right? Not understated. So you have all this overstated pipeline and you don't get enough revenue from it. And so this illusion of success and this illusion of results. So the audited step really is putting in an audit process that every single opportunity gets checked or audited by someone who can create some consistency around, was it qualified? Are the notes in there? And was it truly outbound according to your rules of engagement and rules of attribution?
And Aaron, who do you think should do that? Should that be the business development manager? Should that be ops enablement? Who should be that person who's auditing it in your eyes?
Yeah, I think it's usually often the BDR manager, SDR manager. Another opportunity is if you have like a sales ops person who really has a mind for this. I did it myself with my team at Salesforce. Unfortunately, not enough people do this, even when we say this needs to be done, because it's not. Yeah, it's extra work.
Yeah, I think that's why it's good to have the BD manager on it, because they're typically incentivized. They have an incentive for them to go in and make sure that it's an opportunity. But sometimes there's also the opposite, because they're going to try and make it look like an opportunity.
Yeah, you just got to make sure. Yeah, and you don't want them to be incented the wrong way. But the thing is, the best, and I think there's this thing that needs to be like this top value about an outbound team, which is this team is here to create incremental revenue. It's not here to put a bunch of numbers on the board that may or may not be incremental, because there's a slippery slope where the team needs to hit targets and they start kind of redefining the purpose of the team. Well, what if we take inbound leads and do this? Or what if we take, so I think where this comes from, back at Salesforce, Mark Benioff didn't believe in the value of the outbound SDR team. And there's a good reason for that. The reason was because this is the beginning. At Oracle, what he saw was that the inside, kind of like the equivalent of SDRs, those juniors, they were just paper pushers for the field, for salespeople. They didn't actually add anything. So his whole mentality was, okay, we can try this team, but I'm not expecting it to actually add any real incremental revenue. Kind of gonna prove it to me. And so everything we did was really around auditing, was this actually, incremental revenue that the team added versus just moving numbers around. And so after 2 years, it was a really strict audit process. And I tell you, like, every few months I get an email from Mark saying, hey, there's this big deal that came in, because our team was sourcing half of the top 10 deals every month. Big deal came in and a partner says they sourced that deal, but your team says they sourced it. So who's right? And we could every single time go back and show the audit trail and demonstrate that the team, the outbound team, whenever there's a question, they sourced it and they weren't taking inappropriate credit for deals that weren't truly incremental. And what that created was the executive trust of knowing, okay, this is the team, this is what we're investing in, this is what we're getting back. And as soon as you have that, trust is easily lost, because there's so many ways that SDRs, outbound SDRs, can take credit for leads or deals that they didn't really source, they weren't really outbound. And it's really easy to lose that executive trust through inaccurate, overinflated pipeline. So I harp on that. It's just, to me, a big deal. But what you're really, the whole point is you want an accurate sense of the truth of their pipeline. In outbound, because of all the subjectivity, there's a lot of inaccuracies, which then means for the executives, you don't really know where you are with your pipeline generation. And you won't find out till it's too late that you're going to miss your numbers.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right, so I think I got my soapbox about that. But once you get, again, same thing, once you get your predictable lead generation systems going, and it could be inbound, it could be outbound. We, focus on outbound here because that's just background specialty. We've seen companies like Moby go from like 10x their meetings within a few months. Pemberton, I mentioned, they're from basically struggling, not getting outbound right, to getting an extra million in the first year, and then of course they can grow faster. Acquia was the fastest growing company in North America a few years ago. They went from 0 outbound, they got to like 40, 50 million in inbound, an open source company. And they took 6 months with 3 prospectors to kind of get it going. And then they scaled that, like, oh, okay, then they saw the results and they scaled that team to 40 people. So they were able to add extra 30 million in revenue and break 100 million. They just sold to Vista for $1 billion recently. So the thing is, like, the whole lesson, once you get it working, and it often takes longer than you want and is harder than you think. So that's why, going back to the beginning, it's hard. The bar is higher than people realize. Once you get there, then it becomes a lot easier to scale too. And Zora, again, this is from the new book. Great example. Like, they still generate 60% of their new business from outbound, right? And they're like a $200 million AR company. They're going after Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 in many cases, all account based. So the numbers here is it's more of like a different version. Everyone's a bit different. So Zora, right, they have some list building goals. Let's see if I can do the laser pointer again. Highlighter, I don't think the highlighter. They have some list building goals because they're very account based. So, and they're targeting like Chrysler a lot of times. This is for the bigger ones, right? So how many account plans are they mapping per month? Contacts, right? They've got their activity goals. They call them S1s, but how many are we a fit calls they're looking to get per month? They work to get a quarter of those to be sales accepted opportunities, right? So there's lots of blog posts around teams who are getting like 30 SQLs a month, but Zora's like, our goal is 4. High quality ones, of which 2 go to like a custom demo stage, and they close 1, right? The whole point is this: it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of vanity around, oh, more opportunities, 20 this, and like, as long as you have predictability, I'd rather have a predictable team where each prospector can do 6 opportunities a month than an unpredictable team where sometimes they get 12 and sometimes they get 7, and you just don't really know.
Yeah,
it's more like a vanity based goal. So last thing, it's kind of like content slide I want to touch on is there's this I do a lot of assessments of teams to see what's working, what's not. And I just see these patterns on these problems that people do experience time and time again. And I'd say there's so much focus on quantity of stuff, quantity of activities, quantity of meetings. Really what there's this imbalance. We really need to focus on the focus of the team, the quality of the work, and the scalability and repeatability of what they're doing. So here's just some mistakes that people make. I'll just list them out here. These are the most common ones. Again, I've already mentioned they mix the job includes responding to inbound leads and doing outbound prospecting, right? Big no-no, unless you have really, really compelling reasons to combine them. Your prospectors need to be matched to specific salespeople. Don't pool them. So comp should be farther down the funnel, as far down as possible, not on meetings scheduled, not on meetings held, not on activities, but at least on ideally accepted opportunities. And of course, there's lots of exceptions for where people are, but the most common one should be sales accepted opportunities, or you might call them sales qualified leads. What it means is the salesperson took the meeting, requalified that prospect on the phone or live, not over email, and accepted it according to the criteria that you've agreed on, right? And a lot of times you can comp on revenue as well, right? So you're trying to comp bottom of the funnel. The exception might be you have kind of, you're new, you're getting something going, and you might have some short-term. I didn't say that, Siri. Why did you? Hi, Siri. I was glad I said, hey, Siri. The exception would be the beginning is we don't really have a funnel. We're just trying to get something going. So we'll comp on meetings or some other, just for a month. We'll do something very short term. I'll turn off Siri because you're not helping me, Siri. In your CRM, if you use one that has leads versus accounts, like Salesforce or maybe, but leads tab is for marketing and inbound leads, when prospectors should be using the accounts and contacts areas, right? Because most of the prospecting we're talking about for the audience here is B2B prospecting, where you've got one company with multiple people you may need to talk to. SDR managers, probably sales managers in general, shouldn't have more than 10 reports. It's just too many. And a lot of times, especially if there's lots of newness, it might be, like 6 to 8 reports. Last one, territories. Lots of companies don't have territories or some other way to segment people. And they kind of, I totally get the benefits of having a pool, a round robin system, because it's fair and you can kind of gauge people better. And so sometimes it makes sense, but there's so many fuzzier but compelling benefits of having territory segment-based teams, which means, again, whether it's like by industry, whether it's by actual geography, there's lots of ways you can slice and dice, but there's so much more teamwork and collaboration, and rules of engagement are easier. There's less of the sniping, less of the stealing. I'll give you an example. There's a company called truckstop.com that has, I just think of them because they're kind of in between. They've done a little bit of both, and they were just bought by $1 billion for some other company. I visited them a couple weeks ago. But most of their team of, I can't remember, it was like 50 to 100 people within sales is pooled or round robin, different versions, whether it's the SDRs or salespeople. But they did have one team that had gone to territories, like geographic territories. And while there was some complaints around they weren't totally fair and so on, he said, yeah, but the teamwork that they saw was just, they could tell like the whole shift in the teamwork and the collaboration, the people pulling together. So there's other reasons why. One more is that when people don't have territories, it's just really hard for them to, they just get kind of scattered and like, what should I work on? And all this, like, is it someone else's or not? There's not like clear sandbox rules, which takes so much time and energy. So there's probably a couple more. These are like the most common challenges or problems or mistakes I see people doing when they've got an outbound team, especially working with salespeople. So I'm actually going to plan on turning this into its own webinar or ebook or something, because it's just so, I don't know. I think people could just go and check the box. We're doing that. We're doing that. We're doing that. Well, we're not doing that. We better do that.
Yeah. So Aaron, quick question here. Would you is this simply for outbound, or would you also have your inbound reps have a territory, or is that okay to have round robin for your inbound team?
It kind of depends. So outbound is really more templatized because inbound, there's more variability because like the number of leads and the types of leads. There's just, so in general, I do like it with inbound as well, because then you've got, let's say you've got Carolina, you've got an inbound person and an outbound person and a salesperson and a support person and da-da-da. And of course there's different ratios. So an inbound person might handle the East Coast, while there might be an outbound for New York. So the thing is, I like about that, you get more people that you know. Bob does, and like the people you're working with, and that communication makes it so much easier to work with them when there's disagreements and again like lead stealing and these other things that come up. But sometimes I think it's case by case. Round robin does make sense just for simplicity, or there's not enough leads, and there's a lot of reasons why it can make sense. It doesn't make sense in outbound ever, or so rare that I've never seen it.
Yeah, fair. And then one more clarifying question, because I know this is, I would say, a hotly debated topic, is this idea of comping BDRs or SDRs on revenue. I've ran BD teams in the past. We did it. We actually saw a great, lots of benefits when we comp, like just 1% on, it had to be a large enough deal size. They would get 1% of closed revenue. Some of the benefits we saw were awesome. They would stay longer in a deal, which made the prospect feel better. They got a lot of more learning. So those reps, when they did make a transition to account executive, they were more ready for it because they understand the full deal. What is your view on comping on revenue? Because a lot of people, the argument people make is, well, that's outside of their control. So that can be frustrating, it can be demotivating for the team.
No, okay. So my take is, and I went back and forth with this, and going back to Salesforce, and I've seen it with different companies, ideally I liked half of the variable commission of a prospector is tied to the monthly quota for qualified opportunities, and half is tied to what closes. Yeah. And again, there's always exceptions, right? Because if you sell to the federal government, 18-month, it's just impossible so there's a lot under the control of prospectors. Yeah, they're not doing the closing, but they're the ones who often are doing a lot of the targeting, which is which companies do I go after? Am I going after bigger opportunities or not? So one thing I didn't mention on here with comp is a huge missed opportunity. You need to have a minimum deal size before they can get quota credit on opportunities. Sure. Because the same thing, if they're able to get quota credit for like $1,000 opportunity, that's easier. They'll just do that versus, what you really want, like $10,000, $50,000 opportunities. The easiest way to make more money with outbound is bigger deals, not just more little ones. Yeah. So revenue is another way to kind of incent that towards the quality of the opportunity they're doing and the size of the deal. So I am a full believer in a revenue portion. Yeah. And inbound could be, it's I think it depends at that point, but outbound for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's go quickly to the community. We have a couple minutes left, and Aaron, thank you so much for the presentation. That was awesome. Do we still have a few more?
This is the wrap,
like a recap.
This is a recap, right? So this is the slow down to try to like improve what you're doing before trying to grow too fast. Add in sales specialization, it's just add more roles and make sure you're not combining inbound and outbound unless you really have some compelling reason to. Nailing a niche is going back and trying to, how do you build empathy and like learn to read their minds? Again, interviews is a great way to get more of that. And with predictable lead generation, so if you're not doing outbound, which probably could be possible here, but if you're not doing it, the best way to start is to pick one person to be in charge of figuring it out. And if you are doing it, start by fixing the dashboards because they're going to be off. They just are. And kind of those, like, if anything on that checklist with sales, the operating system resonated, like those are the most common problems. Like, how do you get more quality of the work? So, whoops. And again, this is the site for the book, fromimpossible.com, the new improved edition. So,
love it. So Christmas gift to yourself, salespeople listening, check it out. Or if you got some other If you're a sales family, get it for
Yeah, and the
the whole
audiobook
family.
just came out like a week ago, 2 weeks ago,
Nice.
finally.
Love it, love it. All right, so a couple quick questions. I'm gonna use all the time I can get with you, Aaron. And all right, so here's a really good one from straight from the community. When building a sales organization, it's very specific. When you have 6 sales reps and you're the VP, when do you know when to hire a manager? Do you hire the manager first or the team for them first?
So if you, let's see here, I think if you have 6, do you have a manager yet? I think it's hard to hire, often hard to find a good manager. So it's like, if you have the budget to do it, then I would hire them now if you're growing, and be able to kind of look for the right person. Maybe a lot of times people in the team might turn out to be a good fit. So I think one thing is, I would never, like, any kind of hiring opportunity or job, you should share with the company to make sure that people, like, it never feels good when there's like, when you're not, like, if it's a huge company but smaller company, someone gets hired for a job that no one knew about.
Yeah.
It's just, so sooner rather than later.
What are your thoughts on, I know the first time I got into management, I had a team lead role first. They basically like wanted to test me out. So I was kind of a player coach. What are your thoughts on a team lead position? So maybe they, give someone a team lead title, see how they do before giving them the full manager breakdown.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find this. I love team leads. I love the idea that you kind of have these other steps towards growth, versus it's not just like one huge leap from a salesperson to manager. And we did team leads at Salesforce. I did them. So I love it. And people can kind of volunteer. You see who really wants to learn that and develop it.
Yeah.
Let's see this. Okay. I may not be able to find this article. There's an article which is the 4 phases of building a new sales team. Sorry. But I think because this principle, I think, is more baby steps. If I can't find it here, we can discover it later. 4 phases to building your first sales team. But the point is, I think, take more smaller steps rather than necessarily big leaps.
Yeah.
So the 4 phases are like, this is really more like your first sales team. Like, the CEO sells, number 1. Then you hire a junior person, right? And then you hire a junior person, and a senior person. So then you got CEO and junior and senior. And then you've got CEO, 2 juniors, 2 seniors. And then you hire a leader. So it's not that that's the right recipe. It's just thinking like more smaller steps to de-risk a lot of the process of building an initial team. Because when you're in the beginning stages, it's really risky. It's easy to hire the wrong people. It's easy to have the wrong expectations. And when you take smaller steps at the beginning, it might feel slower, but it's like, you don't, I bet a lot of people here have hired the wrong VP of sales, right? And that's really painful. I can't find that article yet. So more smaller steps. Team leads, great one. Micro promotions, giving people some more time to ramp. It usually takes longer than you realize for them to really get it. Just being prepared.
Yeah, agreed. All right, last question I'll sneak in from Robert. Robert, thanks for the question. All right, he's got a small startup. What is your thought about outsourcing the SDR function to support 1 or 2 internal salespeople?
Yeah, well, I am a fan of outsourcing. In fact, most of our predictablerevenue.com business does it's remote team building. It's not really outsourcing, but I think, again, it's all about, is it right for you? But outsourcing is not, and there's different variations. It's not some sort of magic bullet. Where people go wrong is, oh, I'll hire an outsourced company and they'll just kind of do it, and I won't have to do much, which is completely untrue. It's easier than building your own team in the short term. The upside is not as much usually, but you still have to be prepared to put the time in. Like, who's your customer? You have to be prepared to invest in that project and not treat it as, oh, they'll do it, and if they're not doing it next month, we'll just fire them and get someone else, because it doesn't work that way. So I think it's right. Yes, it can be, if it's the right for you, like you're kind of overwhelmed, you just can't deal, you have the right expectations, you're prepared to put the time in to find the right partner and then to make that work. And again, not be too impatient with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that answer. I think you're going to save time on the hiring and the vetting and the training, but the whole building of the program, you still have to basically do yourself because they can't just build it for you. And like you said, you might not get to reap the benefits long term as much as you would if you built it.
I mean, I can't even, here's a simple example. I can't tell you how many companies get meetings and then they're too busy or they don't follow up, or there's a lot of reasons why, even if that you're getting meetings, you don't do enough with them. There's just so many things that can go wrong that need to be tuned and tweaked. So again, we probably have the right expectations of like 18 months. If you're going from scratch towards building a function, whether it's in remote team, internal, it's probably like 18 months is a pretty fair sense of time to get it like dialed in and seeing revenue from it, right? 6 months is a good frame to get something working and you like feel confident, but then the whole like revenue cycle and when's, you know, and what if you lose someone? So it's probably more like 18 months is not a bad estimate to have in your head of like, when's this gonna like really be making me money?
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be a smooth journey.
Never is. No. Just like your move, probably not gonna be a smooth journey. All right, well that takes us to the hour.
Yeah, Scott, thanks everyone, and everyone had the questions and comments, and
yeah, that was awesome.
So
thank you so much, man. I appreciate the insight. Always good to talk to you. I do hope you have a smooth move, as smooth as possible, and have a great Christmas with your friends and family. And Merry everyone Christmas. Who hung out with us, Merry Christmas. Happy Merry holidays, Christmas, everyone.
You filthy animals.
I love it. See you, man. Take care.
See ya.